Okay. For those that are in the audience, all trials are stressful. These types of trials are stressful and emotional. And there's testimony that's presented, statements that are made, things that are said and done by attorneys that sometimes you don't want to hear, or it makes you upset, gets you angry. It's extremely important as we go through this trial that you not react to things that you don't like. That's difficult. That's extremely difficult to do. But it's extremely important because my concern always is that folks react in a way or in a manner that potentially can influence one of the jurors. It's my role, my responsibility as best as I can to ensure that both sides have a fair trial in this matter. So if anyone does something that I perceive as interfering with the trial or potentially influencing one of the jurors, I'm going to ask the deputy to ask that individual to be removed. Likewise, if there's things that are going on in the courtroom that you just know is going to have a difficult or emotional response from you, please feel free to excuse yourself. And then when you think that you can handle that, then please return to the courtroom. But again, my responsibility is to ensure that both sides have a fair trial and that there's nothing that's done that would influence the jurors in any way. So I just mentioned that because it is. I mean, trials are difficult, trials are stressful, and asking people to sit and listen to things that they don't want to hear or which may cause an emotional response is difficult. I absolutely understand that. But if it would be difficult for you, please excuse yourself. But if there's anything that's done that the court deems to be inappropriate or may influence the jurors in any way, I will absolutely ask one of the deputies to please remove you from the courtroom. All right? Yes, sir.
If I may, I have related to several
stressful. These types of
PowerPoint that will be taken from the scene. And so if there's anyone else in the courtroom that either doesn't want to be exposed to that kind of photograph or observe it, then they should not remain in the courtroom. But I expect to use some of that kind of evidence in an opening statement.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that, Mr. O'Brien. Thank you. Okay, are there any matters that we need to get on the record before bringing the jurors in on behalf of the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would expect John Anderson, the victim's brother, who was with her at the weekend of the murder, to testify sometime today, and at least our view is under Marcy's law, he would be entitled to be in the courtroom at all stages of the proceeding as victim's brother, both during opening statement to the testimony of other witnesses. And I know that the defense counsel, when that information was relayed to them, had an issue they wanted to bring to the attention of the court.
Okay. Well, I'd assume that you would be moving for a separation of witnesses.
Your Honor, that's first. No, first and foremost.
Okay.
This time, Your Honor, we would move for a separation of witnesses.
Okay, so the court will grant the motion for separation of witnesses. All persons that are going to testify in this matter are to remain outside the courtroom until such time as they're called to testify in this case. Any person that is going to testify in this case is to not discuss their testimony with anyone while this case is pending. The court will place the responsibility on counsel to notify any witnesses that you anticipate calling to testify that there is a separation order in place and that if they arrive at the courtroom that they should remain outside until requested to come in, and for counsel to let them know that they are not to discuss their testimony with anyone while this case is still pending. Okay.
Does the court indicate whether or not Mr. Anderson is an exception to that, pursuant to Marcy's law, or not?
I will once the defense lets me know what their argument is.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. And, Your I think in this particular case, martial law doesn't really apply because it's procedure martial law, but on the other hand, Your Honor, what's more important in procedures of this nature is the constitutional rights of the defendant to have a fair and impartial trial. I think there's a reason for the rule of separation of witnesses, and that's so that the testimony of each witness is independent and uncompromised by the testimony of any other witness in this case. I think it would be unfair to Mr. Pardon to have a witness who intends to testify to hear from other witnesses who will be talking about the same issues he will be discussing. So I think it compromises, it has the potential to compromise the testimony of a witness in this case. So we're asking that the court exclude all witnesses until after they testify. I think that after Mr. Anderson testifies, we won't have any problem with him sitting in the gallery for however long he wants to sit. But until he actually testifies, we'd ask that he be held out until that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, any response on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, at least my understanding is that Mr. Anderson would have a right pursuant to Marcy's law to be present at the entire in-court proceedings, such as will occur today, on the day he would testify, and thereafter, unless the court would find that that violates the due process clause of the United States or the Ohio Constitution. And since he's previously given a statement to the police that the defense counsel has, if there is any deviation from that statement in his testimony here in court, certainly he can cross-examine him on that basis and point out that he may have had that testimony altered by virtue of having sit through parts of these proceedings, but at least my reading and understanding of Marcy's law, he would have a right to be here, absent finding by the court that due process or the right to a fair trial and the due process clause would be violated. And at least I don't hear Mr. Thomas identifying a specific reason why it would be violated other than in general terms.
All right, thank you. Any response?
Judge, I can't be specific. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with the state of Ohio that a prior statement was given. But at the same time, Judge, the prior statement may not cover areas which he may testify to or areas in which he might be cross-examined on. Again, I think the rule is in effect for a reason. I think it's clearly pointed out that it's to avoid the opportunity for a witness to be influenced by another witness's testimony. That's why you have a separation of witness. That's why you give the admonition. Witnesses are not to discuss their testimony with anybody else. So it's not general and specific so that we don't have that issue. That is no longer an issue. That is a violation of his constitutional rights to fairly cross-examine and separate these witnesses from compromising. So I think that that's why the rule is in place. I understand that Marcy law and its concern for people to be able to hear what's going on with relatives' cases. I get that. But I don't think that right trumps Mr. Pardon's right to have a fair and impartial trial.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I mean, the evidence rule that talks about separation of witnesses does provide for one exception that we're all familiar with, that an investigating detective who could potentially testify at trial is allowed to sit in court as a representative on behalf of the state, if the state chose to do so. We don't tend to do it in this jurisdiction, but I know other jurisdictions where it's commonplace. So there are exceptions to the separation of witnesses rule. Here, because of Marcy's law being a constitutional protection, and again, the cases that I've had an opportunity to review tend to indicate that it is not considered a violation and does not prejudice the defendant when victims have been allowed to remain in the courtroom prior to their testimony. So the court's going to allow the witness to remain in the courtroom. Okay, are there any other matters that we need to get on the record at this time?
Not from the state, Your Honor.
Nothing but on behalf of Mr. Pardon.
All right, thank you. All right. Mrs. Harper?